The hologram flickered to life in the center of the council chamber, casting blue light across 12 empty seats that had once held the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Speaker Vexthara stood alone in the vast room, her scaled hands trembling. As she activated the archive for the 1,000th time in 50 years, the image that appeared made her stomach turn with familiar dread. Jake Morrison stood at the central podium, his human face calm but his eyes burning with quiet fury. Behind him sat the other human representatives, their expressions unreadable but united in their silence. The date stamp showed exactly 50 years, 3 months, and 14 days ago, we have served this galaxy faithfully for 3 centuries. Jake's voice echoed through the empty chamber, just as clear and damning as it had been that final day. We have bled for worlds not our own and died for species that view us as nothing more than primitive mammals with useful tools. Vexthara closed her eyes, but the words continued to play. She had heard this speech so many times that she could recite it perfectly, yet she still hoped to find some clue she had missed. Some hint of what was coming. We built your space stations when your engineers said it was impossible, Jake continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling every corner of the massive chamber. We solved your food shortages when your scientists gave up. We ended your wars when your diplomats failed. We protected your trade routes when your fleets turned tail and ran. The other council members had been present that day, their alien faces showing everything from boredom to outright contempt. The Zelenary representative had actually been filing her claws during Jake's speech. The Thraxian ambassador was reading reports on his personal tablet. Only Speaker Vexthara had been paying attention, and even she had dismissed it as another human complaint session. Today we present you with our final requirements, Jake had said, his tone becoming formal and cold. Full representation in council. Decisions that affect human colonies. Equal credit for technological innovations developed by human scientists. Fair distribution of resources from systems protected by human military forces. And an immediate end to the systematic exclusion of human voices from galactic policy. The hologram showed Vexthara's younger self rising from her seat, her voice dripping with the arrogance that now made her feel sick. Ambassador Morrison, the humans have been valuable contributors to galactic civilization, but your species must understand your place in the greater order. The Council has functioned for millennia before your arrival and will continue long after your time has passed. Jake had nodded slowly as if he had expected exactly that response. You have 30 standard days to consider our position. If meaningful changes are not implemented by then, humanity will withdraw from all council agreements and seek our own path among the stars. The Thraxian ambassador had laughed out loud at that threat. Where will you go, little mammals? There is nothing beyond our borders but empty space and savage worlds. You need us far more than we need you, but Jake had simply smiled, a cold expression that should have warned them all. We shall see. Vexthara stopped the recording and walked to the great windows that overlooked the council's capital city. The view that greeted her was nothing like the thriving metropolis of 50 years ago. Half the buildings stood dark and empty, their human-designed power systems failing one by one. The elegant transport tubes that Jake Morrison's engineers had built lay silent and broken. The beautiful gardens that human botanists had cultivated were withering without proper care in the distance. She could see the skeletal remains of the orbital shipyards where human workers had built 90% of the Council's fleet. Without human maintenance crews and human-designed manufacturing systems, ship production had dropped to almost nothing. The few vessels still being produced took 5 times as long to build and broke down twice as often. The 30 days had passed without any real changes. Oh, the Council had held meetings and formed committees and written strongly worded statements about reviewing human requests. But in the end, they had done nothing meaningful. Most of the representatives believed the humans were bluffing, that they would never actually abandon the security and prosperity of Council space. They had been wrong on day 31. Humanity had simply vanished. No dramatic announcements, no violent confrontations, no destruction of their installations. They had just quietly gathered their people, loaded their ships, and disappeared into the dark spaces between the stars. The human colonies were found empty but undamaged. The human military bases were abandoned but intact. Even their personal belongings had been left behind, as if they planned to return someday, but they never did. For the first few months, the Council had actually celebrated. Finally, they could claim full credit for human innovations. The fusion reactors became Council technology. The faster-than-light communication networks became collaborative developments. The tactical doctrines that had won a dozen wars became traditional galactic strategy. The problem started small. A few power grid failures here and there. Some communication delays between distant worlds. Minor pirate raids that took longer than usual to suppress. The Council's engineers assured everyone that these were temporary issues that would be resolved quickly. 5 years later, the failures were becoming catastrophic. 10 years after that, entire sectors were going dark. 20 years in, trade routes were collapsing and member worlds were openly questioning Council authority. 30 years after the human departure, 3 species had withdrawn from the Council entirely. Now, 50 years later, Speaker Vexthara ruled over a dying civilization. The once proud Council controlled less than half of its former territory. Pirate fleets roamed freely through systems that human patrols had once kept safe. Diseases that human doctors had cured were spreading across multiple worlds. Technologies that human scientists had developed were breaking down without replacement. The bitter truth was becoming impossible to ignore. For 3 centuries, humanity had been the backbone of galactic civilization. Not the public face or the official leadership, but the skilled hands and creative minds that made everything actually work. They had been the engineers who built the impossible, the soldiers who won the unwinnable wars, the diplomats who solved the unsolvable crises, and the Council had treated them like junior partners at best. Useful servants at worst. Vexthara turned away from the windows and walked back to her seat at the center of the chamber. Around her, the holographic displays showed the current state of Council space in stark red warnings. Food shortages on 17 worlds, energy crises in 43 systems, open warfare in 12 sectors, and everywhere the slow but steady collapse of infrastructure that had taken centuries to build. She activated her personal communicator and sent a message to the Council's best remaining ship captain. "Captain Turner, please report to my office immediately. We have a mission to discuss." It was time to swallow their pride and do what should have been done 50 years ago. It was time to find humanity and beg them to come home. Even if it meant admitting that the species they had dismissed as primitive mammals were the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever seen. The hologram of Jake Morrison flickered one more time before shutting down, his final words echoing in the empty chamber. "We shall see." Indeed they would. Director Zalquin pressed his 6 insectoid hands against the control panel as another system failure. Alert flashed red across the massive display screen. The central power grid for Sector 7 had just gone offline, leaving 12 billion beings without electricity, heat, or life support. It was the 4th major failure this month, and Zalquin knew it would not be the last. His compound eyes scanned the technical readout with growing despair. Every critical system in Council space bore the same signature, the same elegant design philosophy, the same impossible efficiency that could only come from one source: human engineering. And without humans to maintain these systems, they were failing one by one like dominoes in a cosmic chain reaction. "Sir, we have another emergency transmission from the Outer Rim colonies," his assistant announced from across the command center. 3 more worlds are requesting immediate evacuation. "Assistance. Their atmospheric processors are breaking down." Zalquin made a clicking sound with his mandibles that indicated extreme frustration. Those atmospheric processors had been installed by Dr. Kevin Walsh 40 years ago, turning barren rocks into garden worlds that now supported millions of lives. Walsh had tried repeatedly to train alien engineers in their maintenance, but the Council had always been too busy to spare qualified personnel for such mundane tasks. "Tell them we will send a repair team as soon as one becomes available," Zalquin replied, knowing full well that no such team existed. The few non-human engineers who understood even basic human technology were already overwhelmed with more critical emergencies. He pulled up another file on his personal screen, one that he had been reviewing obsessively for weeks. It contained the complete record of Dr. Kevin Walsh's career with the Council, and reading it was like watching a slow-motion disaster that everyone should have seen coming. Walsh had started as a junior engineer fresh out of Human Technical College, assigned to what the Council considered routine maintenance work on older space stations. Within 6 months, he had redesigned their power distribution systems and increased efficiency by 60%. The Council took credit for the improvement and promoted him to more challenging projects over the next 20 years. Walsh had revolutionized galactic infrastructure. He created fusion reactors that could power entire solar systems. He designed communication arrays that could transmit messages across the galaxy in real time. He built defensive platforms that could protect whole sectors from invasion. And with each breakthrough, the Council had quietly removed his name from the official records and labeled the innovations as collaborative. Council achievements. The breaking point had come when Walsh presented his most ambitious project, a plan to create a galaxy-wide energy network that would have eliminated power shortages forever. The proposal required significant resources and authority that only the Council could provide. The response had been swift and dismissive. Dr. Walsh, while your contributions are appreciated, this project is beyond the scope of human capabilities, the Council had written in their official rejection. We suggest you focus on more practical endeavors suitable to your species' limitations. 6 months later, Walsh had submitted his resignation and returned to human space. The energy network was never built, and now 40% of Council worlds faced regular power outages. O'Quinn closed the file and opened another one that made his stomach acids churn with regret. Captain Ron Baker's personnel record told a similar story of brilliance ignored and talent wasted. Baker had joined the Council's transport division when interstellar travel was still a dangerous gamble that killed thousands of beings every year. Baker had studied the problem with typical human persistence, analyzing every hyperspace accident and navigation failure in Council records. Working 18-hour days for months, he had developed a completely new approach to faster-than-light travel that reduced accidents by 98%. Ships could now jump between stars with confidence instead of fear. The navigation protocols had become standard throughout Council space, saving countless lives and making trade between distant worlds profitable for the first time. But when Baker had requested recognition for his work, the Council had explained that navigation was too important to be associated with any single species. This technology belongs to all civilized beings, they had told him. Taking individual credit would be selfish and inappropriate. Baker had continued his work for another decade, constantly improving the safety and efficiency of galactic travel. He had trained dozens of alien navigators and written the manuals that every pilot in Council space still used. But when promotion time came, the advancement always went to non-human candidates who had contributed far less but were considered more suitable for leadership positions. The day before humanity's departure, Baker had submitted a final report to the Council's Transportation Authority. In simple, technical language, he had explained that his navigation systems required regular updates and maintenance that only he fully understood. Without human oversight, the systems would begin developing errors that would eventually make space travel as dangerous as it had been before his innovations. The Council had filed the report and forgotten about it. Now, 50 years later, ships were disappearing in hyperspace every week. Trade routes that had been safe for decades were becoming death traps. The economic foundation of galactic civilization was crumbling because no one had bothered to learn how Captain Ron Baker's systems actually worked. But perhaps the most painful file in Zalquing's collection belonged to Amy Collins, the human who had single-handedly created the economic framework that held the galaxy together. Collins had started as a minor trade coordinator, handling shipping schedules and cargo manifests for small merchant fleets. The work was considered boring and unimportant, perfect for a human who needed to feel useful, what the Council had not. realized was that Collins possessed an almost supernatural understanding of economic systems. She could see patterns and connections that escaped even the most sophisticated computer models. Within a few years, she had identified inefficiencies in galactic trade that were costing trillions of credits annually. Her reforms had been quietly implemented across council space, always presented as the work of alien economic experts who took credit for her insights. Trade volumes increased by 400%. Inflation dropped to historic lows. Even the poorest worlds saw dramatic improvements in their standard of living. Collins had prevented 3 separate economic collapses through careful manipulation of trade policies and resource distribution. Each time, her warnings had been ignored. Until crisis was imminent, then her solutions had been implemented without acknowledgement. The pattern continued for 30 years until humanity's departure. Now the galaxy was facing its worst economic crisis in recorded history. Without Collins's steady hand-guiding trade policy, inflation was spiraling out of control. Resource distribution had become chaotic and unfair. Member worlds were hoarding goods and imposing tariffs that Collins's system had been designed to prevent. Quinn stood up from his desk and walked to the observation window that overlooked the Council's main trading hub. Once, this had been the busiest commercial center in the galaxy, with thousands of ships arriving and departing every day. Now he could count fewer than 50 vessels in the entire complex, and most of those were preparing to leave Council space permanently. His communicator buzzed with another urgent message. The Vrelian delegation was formally withdrawing from the Council, citing systematic infrastructure failures and economic instability. They were the 5th species to abandon the Alliance this year, taking their resources and technology with them. The irony was not lost on Zalquin. The Council had spent centuries lecturing humans about their proper place in galactic civilization, treating them as useful but ultimately replaceable contributors to a greater cause. Now it was becoming clear that humans had not been contributors to galactic civilization at all. They had been galactic civilization, working behind the scenes to make everything function while others took the credit without them. The galaxy was not just struggling, it was dying. And unless something changed soon, the great council that had ruled the stars for millennia would collapse into nothing more than a historical footnote in someone else's record. Zalkin returned to his desk and opened a new file. This one containing Speaker Vexthara's latest directive, a search mission to locate humanity and negotiate their return. It was a desperate gamble that would require swallowing 50 years of pride and admitting truths that the Council had spent centuries denying. But what choice did they have? The humans had built this civilization, and the humans had taken it with them when they left. Now the Council faced a simple choice: find humanity and beg for mercy, or watch everything they had ever known crumble into dust among the stars. Captain Greg Turner stood on the bridge of his ship as it emerged from hyperspace at the edge of what had once been the Terran colonial zone. The view before him should have shown bustling human settlements and busy shipping lanes filled with Earth-registered vessels. Instead, he saw nothing but empty space, dotted with abandoned stations that drifted silent and dark among the stars. Turner was one of the few non-human officers who had genuinely respected humanity during their time with the Council. A career military man from the Centauri Republic, he had fought alongside human soldiers and learned to appreciate their unique approach to warfare and diplomacy. When Speaker Vexthara had asked him to lead the search mission, he had accepted immediately, despite knowing it was probably hopeless. "Sir, we are detecting faint energy signatures from the old Proxima station," reported his navigation officer. "It appears to be running on emergency power only." Turner nodded and ordered his ship to approach the massive orbital platform that had once served as the administrative center for human colonial operations. As they drew closer, the true scale of humanity's departure became clear. The station had been designed to support a population of 50,000 beings, but their sensors showed fewer than a dozen life signs aboard. The docking bay doors opened to admit their shuttle, and Turner found himself walking through corridors that felt like a museum of abandoned dreams. Human artwork still hung on the walls, depicting scenes of Earth's blue skies and green forests. Children's drawings were posted on bulletin boards showing stick figure families playing under alien suns. Personal belongings sat exactly where their owners had left them, as if everyone had simply stepped out for a moment and planned to returning the station's central command center. Turner found the answers he had been seeking. The main computer was still operational, maintained by a small automated caretaker system that the humans had left behind. When he accessed the files, what he discovered made him understand why humanity had vanished so completely. The records showed that Commander Steve Parker had been right about everything. Parker had been the human military strategist who had ended the devastating sector wars in under 2 years, saving millions of lives and bringing peace to dozens of worlds. His tactical innovations had become the foundation of all Council military doctrine. Yet his name appeared nowhere in the official histories. Turner read through Parker's classified reports with growing amazement. The human commander had not just won battles through superior firepower or technology. He had won them by understanding his enemies better than they understood themselves. Parker had studied alien psychology, culture, and military traditions. Until he could predict their actions with uncanny accuracy, sector wars had been considered unwinnable before Parker's arrival. 3 major species had been locked in a bloody stalemate for over a decade, with casualty rates climbing into the millions every year. Traditional Council strategy called for massive frontal assaults and prolonged siege warfare that would have taken decades to resolve. Parker had taken one look at the situation and proposed something completely different. Instead of attacking enemy strongholds, he had targeted their supply lines and communication networks. Instead of fighting where the enemy expected, he had struck where they were weakest. Most importantly, he had offered honorable surrender terms that allowed defeated enemies to save face while joining the Council as equals. The results had been spectacular. Major enemy fleets had surrendered without firing a shot when Parker demonstrated that he could cut off their supply lines at will. Entire worlds had switched sides when they realized that Council victory was inevitable and that Parker would treat them fairly. Within 18 months, a war that had seemed endless was over, but when the victory celebrations began, Parker's name was carefully omitted from all official accounts. The Council's own generals, who had opposed his strategies from the beginning, took credit for the triumph. Parker was given a minor decoration and reassigned to training duties. On a remote human colony, Turner found similar patterns throughout the records. Dr. Michelle Adams had been the xenobiologist who made peaceful first contact possible with over 30 different species. Her psychological profiles and cultural analyses had prevented countless wars and established the diplomatic framework that held the galaxy together. Adams had spent years developing techniques for communicating with radically alien minds. She had learned to think like a hive-mind insectoid, to understand the honor-based culture of reptilian warriors, to navigate the complex social hierarchies of aquatic species. Her work had turned first contact from a dangerous gamble into a predictable science set. When the Council published its official guides to interspecies diplomacy, Adams's name was nowhere to be found. Her techniques were described as traditional Council methods that had been refined through collaborative effort. Adams herself was transferred to increasingly remote assignments, until she finally requested a return to human space. The most disturbing discovery came when Turner accessed the files of Maria Santos, a human diplomat who had served as an early warning system for the Council's leadership. Santos had possessed an almost supernatural ability to predict political crises before they developed, giving the Council time to prevent disasters that could have destabilized entire sectors. Her reports read like prophecies written by someone who could see the future. 3 years before the Helios Rebellion, Santos had warned that economic inequality in that system was reaching dangerous levels. 2 years before the vegan trade war, she had predicted that resource disputes would lead to armed conflict unless addressed immediately. 6 months before the Andromedan secession crisis, she had outlined exactly how the situation would unfold in every case. Her warnings had been ignored until events proved her right. Then Council diplomats would rush to implement her suggested solutions, always taking credit for the ideas while treating Santos as a lucky guesser. who had stumbled onto obvious answers. The pattern continued for decades until Santos submitted her final report, a comprehensive analysis of growing anti-human sentiment within the Council itself. She had documented systematic discrimination, deliberate exclusion from important decisions, and a coordinated effort to minimize human contributions to galactic civilization. The Council leadership appears to view humanity as a useful but ultimately temporary addition to galactic society, Santos had written in her last official document. Current trends suggest that human influence will be systematically reduced until our species is relegated to a purely supportive role with no meaningful voice in our own future. She had recommended immediate reforms to address these issues before they led to a complete breakdown in human council relations. The report had been filed and forgotten, like so many others before it. 6 months later, humanity had announced their departure. Turner sat back in his chair and stared at the evidence spread across his screens. The humans had not abandoned the galaxy in a moment of anger or pride. They had been systematically pushed out by a council that wanted their contributions but not their participation. Every slight, every snub, every stolen credit had been carefully documented by people who understood exactly what was happening. Most shocking of all, Turner found evidence that humanity had been preparing for their departure for decades. While maintaining their duties and obligations to the Council, they had quietly been developing independent colonies in unexplored regions of space. They had been building ships and technologies that surpassed anything in Council arsenals. They had been establishing contact with species that the Council had never encountered. The humans had not fled in desperation. They had graduated to something better. Turner activated his ship's communication system and sent a priority message back to Speaker Vexthara. The news he had to report would not be welcome, but it had to be delivered. The Council was not searching for refugees who needed rescue. They were searching for a civilization that had moved so far beyond them that they might not even remember why the galaxy had once seemed important. Finding humanity would be only the beginning of their problems. Convincing them to return would require admitting truths that the Council had spent 50 years trying to forget. And even then, Turner suspected that the species they had once dismissed as junior partners might no longer be interested in anything the galaxy had to offer. Captain Turner's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates his search team had finally traced after months of following cold trails and dead ends. What he saw before him made his breath catch in his throat and his hands tremble on the command console. Spread across the star system was a civilization that defied everything he thought he knew about technological possibility. Massive orbital structures ringed the central star, harvesting its energy with an efficiency that made Council fusion reactors look like primitive campfires. Space habitats the size of small moons drifted in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming with materials that his sensors could not identify. Ships moved between the structures with grace and speed that made his own vessel seem like a clumsy antique. "Sir, we are being scanned by something," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with nervousness. "The scanning beam is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be analyzing our ship down to the molecular level." Before Turner could respond, a new voice filled the bridge through speakers that had not been activated. The voice was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel. You are entering sovereign human space. Please state your business and prepare to be escorted to a designated meeting area. Any aggressive actions will result in your immediate removal from this system." Turner stood up and activated his own communication system, hoping his voice would not betray the awe and fear he was feeling. "This is Captain Greg Turner of the Council. Ship Harmony. I am here under direct authorization from Speaker Vexthara to locate human representatives and discuss matters of mutual importance." There was a long pause before the human voice responded. "Captain Turner, you are expected. Please follow the escort ships that are approaching your position. Do not deviate from their course or attempt to scan our installations. Welcome to New Terra." 3 ships appeared on Turner's viewscreen, moving toward his vessel with impossible smoothness. They were clearly of human design, but bore no resemblance to anything humanity had possessed during their time with the Council. These ships were works of art as much as instruments of war, their hulls flowing like liquid metal and their energy signatures unlike anything Turner had ever encountered. As his ship followed the escorts deeper into the system, Turner began to understand the true scope of what humanity had accomplished in their 50 years of isolation. The structures they passed were not just advanced, they were revolutionary. Entire asteroids had been converted into manufacturing facilities that produced goods at speeds that violated known laws of physics. Agricultural stations grew food in ways that seemed to bend the rules of biology itself. "Sir, I am detecting 17 inhabited worlds in this system alone," his science officer reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "Each one appears to support populations in the hundreds of millions. The level of terraforming technology required for this would be centuries beyond our current capabilities." Turner nodded silently as they approached what appeared to be the central command station, a structure so vast that his ship's computers had difficulty calculating its dimensions. As they docked, he noticed that the docking bay was designed to accommodate vessels much larger than anything the Council had ever built. The delegation that met them at the airlock was led by a woman Turner recognized from the old Council records. Angela Davis had been a junior diplomat during humanity's final years with the Council, someone the leadership had dismissed as too emotional and inexperienced for important assignments. Now she wore the uniform of a senior human official and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to real authority. "Captain Turner, I am Director Angela Davis of the Human Diplomatic Corps," she said as she shook his hand, with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "President Dan Miller is waiting to meet with you. I trust your journey was not too difficult." Turner followed Davis through corridors that seemed to extend forever in all directions. The technology surrounding him was clearly human in origin, but advanced beyond anything he had imagined possible. Walls displayed information in languages he did not recognize, and beings moved past them who were clearly not human but treated the humans as equals rather than superiors. "Director Davis, may I ask about the other species I am seeing here?" Turner said as they walked past a group of tall, graceful beings with crystalline skin who were engaged in animated conversation with human scientists. "Ah, you're meeting some of our partners," Davis replied with a smile that held no malice but also no warmth. "Humanity has encountered many fascinating civilizations in the regions beyond Council space. Unlike our previous experience, these relationships are based on mutual respect and genuine cooperation." They entered a vast chamber where a man Turner recognized as Dan Miller stood waiting beside a holographic display showing the layout of human space. Miller had been a minor colonial administrator during the Council years, someone so low in the hierarchy that most Council members had never even heard his name. Now he clearly commanded a civilization that spanned multiple star systems. "Captain Turner, welcome to our new home," Miller said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to raise it to be obeyed. "I understand that Speaker Vexthara has sent you to discuss the situation in Council space." Turner struggled to find the right words to begin his impossible mission. "President Miller, the Council faces unprecedented challenges that threaten the stability of galactic civilization. We have come to request assistance in addressing these crises and to discuss the possibility of renewed cooperation between our peoples." Miller gestured to chairs arranged around a conference table that had not been there moments before. As they sat down, the holographic display changed to show a detailed map of Council space with red indicators marking areas of conflict and system failures. "We are aware of the difficulties you face," Miller said calmly. "Our monitoring stations have been tracking the deterioration of Council infrastructure for decades. The pattern was quite predictable given the fundamental flaws in your approach to governance and resource management." Turner felt his heart sink as he realized that humanity had been watching the Council's decline with the detached interest of scientists observing a failed experiment. "President Miller, I must be direct," Turner said, abandoning diplomatic protocol in favor of desperate honesty. "Without human assistance, the Council will collapse within the next decade. Billions of innocent beings will suffer as systems fail and conflicts spread. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership in the Council with equal representation and complete autonomy over your affairs. Miller leaned back in his chair and exchanged glances with Director Davis before responding. Captain Turner, I appreciate your directness, but I think you misunderstand our position. Humanity is no longer interested in membership in an organization that treated us as junior partners for 3 centuries. We have moved beyond the need for such arrangements. The holographic display changed again to show the extent of human civilization in their new region of space. Turner counted dozens of star systems under human control, each one more advanced than anything in Council space. Trade routes connected them to civilizations he had never heard of, forming networks of cooperation that dwarfed the Council's influence. We have built something better here, Miller continued, his voice carrying no trace of anger or resentment. Only the calm satisfaction of someone who had proven a point beyond any doubt. We have relationships based on mutual respect rather than grudging tolerance. We have technology that advances through cooperation rather than competition. We have a future that we control rather than one dictated by others. Turner felt the weight of his mission collapsing around him as he realized that humanity had not just survived their exile from Council space. They had thrived beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The species that the Council had once considered useful but replaceable had become something that made the Council itself seem primitive and obsolete. What about the innocent beings who will suffer when the Council falls? Turner asked, making one last desperate appeal to human compassion. Miller's expression softened slightly as he considered the question. Captain Turner, humanity has never been indifferent to suffering. We will discuss what assistance we might provide to ease the transition. But understand this clearly, we will not return to a system that treated us as servants while taking credit for our work. Those days are over forever. Chancellor Tom Wright stood at the center of the massive chamber aboard humanity's greatest achievement, a space structure so large that its own gravity held atmosphere around its outer hull. Turner had been brought here for what President Miller had called the final discussion, and the captain could feel the weight of galactic history pressing down on him like a physical force. Wright himself was perhaps the greatest shock of all for Turner to process. The Council records showed him as a minor colony administrator who had managed supply shipments to remote human settlements. His reports had been filed under routine paperwork, and his name had appeared in Council databases only as a minor footnote in larger operations. Now he commanded a civilization that spanned 17 star systems and controlled technology that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Captain Turner, you have traveled far to reach us, and I understand the desperation that drove your mission, Wright said, as holographic displays around the chamber showed real-time images of Council space in its current state of collapse. Before we discuss what assistance humanity might provide, I believe you should understand exactly what you are asking of us. The displays shifted to show the timeline of humanity's relationship with the Council, but this version told a very different story than the one Turner had learned in his history classes. It showed 3 centuries of systematic discrimination disguised as partnership, of human innovations credited to alien scientists, of human lives sacrificed for alien causes while being denied any real voice in their own destiny. We came to you as equals seeking mutual cooperation, Wright continued, his voice carrying the patient tone of a teacher explaining simple facts to a slow student. We offered our knowledge, our skills, our very lives in service of what we believed was a greater galactic community. In return, we were treated as useful servants who should be grateful for the privilege of serving their betters. Turner watched as the displays showed battle after battle where human soldiers had died protecting alien worlds. Scientific breakthrough after breakthrough where human researchers had solved problems that alien experts had declared impossible. Diplomatic crisis after diplomatic crisis where human negotiators had prevented wars that would have killed millions. In every case, the credit had gone to non-human leaders while the humans were quietly transferred to less visible positions. We learned patience during those centuries, Wright said as the timeline moved toward humanity's final years with the Council. We learned to document everything because we knew our contributions would be forgotten or stolen. We learned to prepare for the future because we understood that our partnership with the Council was never truly a partnership at all. The displays now showed the careful preparations humanity had made for their departure, plans that had been decades in the making. While serving faithfully in Council space, human scientists had been secretly exploring the regions beyond known boundaries. Human engineers had been developing technologies that surpassed anything in the Council's arsenals. Human diplomats had been making contact with civilizations that the Council had never discovered when we finally left. It was not an act of anger or rebellion, Wright explained as the images showed the quiet, methodical evacuation of human personnel from Council space. It was graduation. We had learned everything we could from your civilization, and it was time to move beyond its limitations. Turner found his voice at last, though it came out smaller and more desperate than he had intended. Chancellor Wright, whatever mistakes were made in the past, surely the current crisis transcends old grievances. Billions of innocent beings face starvation, disease, and death as Council systems fail. Surely humanity's compassion extends to those who bear no responsibility for past injustices. Wright nodded slowly, his expression showing genuine sympathy for Turner's position. Captain, you are correct that innocent beings should not suffer for the failures of their leaders. Dr. Susan Clark will explain what assistance we are prepared to provide. A woman entered the chamber whom Turner recognized as another name from the old personnel files. Susan Clark had been a medical researcher whose work on alien biology had saved countless lives throughout Council space. Her breakthroughs in treating diseases that affected multiple species had been credited to the Council Medical Authority. While she had been assigned to increasingly remote research stations, Captain Turner, humanity will provide emergency medical supplies to treat the plague outbreaks in the Outer Rim sectors, Dr. Clark announced as she activated a holographic display showing shipping schedules and cargo manifests. We will also provide food shipments to address the famine conditions on 17 worlds and technical assistance to prevent the complete collapse of life. Support systems in critical areas. Turner felt a surge of hope as he realized that humanity was not completely indifferent to the Council's plight. Dr. Clark, this assistance could save millions of lives. The Council will be eternally grateful for your compassion. But Wright raised his hand to indicate that the discussion was not finished. Admiral Paul Garcia will explain the conditions under which this assistance will be provided. Another figure entered the chamber, and Turner nearly fell from his chair in shock. Paul Garcia had been listed in Council records as a minor logistics officer who had handled supply runs to frontier outposts. Now he wore the uniform of a human fleet admiral and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding vast military forces. Captain Turner, human assistance will be provided for exactly 10 standard years, Garcia announced with military precision. During this period, Council forces will provide no interference with human operations and will make no requests for additional aid beyond what has been authorized. After 10 years, all assistance will cease permanently. Turner felt his momentary hope crashing back into despair as he realized the implications of what he was hearing. Admiral Garcia, 10 years is not enough time to rebuild our civilization. The infrastructure problems alone will take decades to resolve. Garcia's expression remained impassive as he delivered humanity's final terms. Captain Turner, 10 years is more than sufficient time for the Council to transition to complete independence from human support. The galaxy managed to function before humanity arrived, and it will learn to function again after we withdraw. But surely there can be some ongoing cooperation, Turner pleaded, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic dignity. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration. The benefits of renewed partnership would be enormous for both civilizations. Wright's answer came with the finality of a closing door. Captain Turner, humanity offered partnership to the Council for 3 centuries. We were rejected in favor of a relationship where we provided service while others claimed authority. We have learned that lesson and we will not repeat the experience. The holographic displays changed one final time to show the current extent of human civilization in their new region of space. Turner saw dozens of species working together as Genuine equals sharing knowledge and resources without the hierarchical structure that had defined council governance. He saw technologies advancing at incredible speed through true cooperation rather than competitive secrecy. He saw a future that the council could have shared if they had possessed the wisdom to treat humanity as partners, rather than servants, Captain. Turner, you will be provided with complete documentation of the assistance we are offering along with detailed schedules for its delivery, Wright said as the meeting drew to its close. I suggest you return to council space immediately to begin organizing the distribution of aid. 10 years will pass more quickly than you imagine as Turner prepared to leave. Wright offered one final observation that would echo in the captain's mind for the rest of his life. Captain, humanity wishes the council no ill will. We simply learned that the galaxy is vast enough for all civilizations to find their own path among the stars. We found ours 50 years ago. Now you must find yours. Turner returned to his ship knowing that he carried humanity's final gift to the civilization that had once ruled them. 10 years of assistance to ease the transition, then permanent separation from the species that had grown beyond any need for the galaxy they had once called home. In the end, humanity had taught the Council the most important lesson of all, that true strength came not from ruling others but from no longer needing to be ruled.